So thank you so much, first of all, for the opportunity to share some ideas with you today. As you've heard, I'm a PhD-trained chemist by background, and what I want to share with you today is a bit about innovation. And first of all, saying that, yes, as I said, by background, I'm a chemist, and what inspired me to be a chemist was the fascinations for bubbles. So I want to make an analogy with bubbles and saying that today we live in different bubbles. We live in a polarized world, and it's getting harder and harder to break these bubbles. So the issue that I see is that as you get into a bubble, you, especially once you leave university, you have basically a barrier to entry for different bubbles. And if we look at it from really like a societal point of view, we challenge to see the values and also the struggles of different bubbles. But I personally like to pop the bubbles. And so to briefly share a bit of my personal story, as I said, I'm a chemist. I, however, transitioned into environmental technologies, so looking especially at what I think is the holy grail, which is water. And after that, I did something that was quite uncommon for, the average student that would study environmental technologies, that I joined one of the largest chemical multinationals in the middle of nowhere in the Netherlands, with the consciousness that I was going there to learn the language, to kind of provoke them as well, but then to pop that bubble and go back to the academic bubble where I did my PhD, to come with that realization, also with that mindset of trying to make something useful. And of course, I also enjoyed the path, right? Like, our life is a journey, so enjoy the journey while you try and reach somewhere. And now I entered the entrepreneurship bubble. And so far, it's great. And the interesting aspect about entrepreneurship is that you can see these ideas become tangible realities. So that's, I would say, the difference between academia and entrepreneurship. And something that is key, to breaking the bubbles is that it's easy to critique. It's easy to critique your country, to critique your job, to critique your boss. But what entrepreneurs do is that they show a solution of this critique. So to get away from inaction, they move to action, and they try and create value by providing us solutions instead of just critiquing. And I think, going back to the previous panel, they were talking about energy communities. I think this is an excellent way of popping bubbles and making different stakeholders come in one place for a common good, but also some personal good. And hence, when I look at innovation and entrepreneurship in particular, is that motivational force to cooperate, knowing that alone you cannot go very far, and it's not competitive. I mean, there is a part of competition, but it's not the sole purpose. We have sports. In Paris, we have the Olympic Games coming up if you want to compete, but this is about cooperation. And so stepping now even further back, we look at the globe, we look at the many challenges that we're facing, and climate and adaptation to it is probably top of the list, and hence we need the best innovators, the best creative minds to come up with solutions. And Europe, I think, is positioned quite well, if not very well, to these creative minds by history, by kind of looking back in our roots. We're known for our values and for our innovation, and I think we need to leverage at this point as much as we can. We have excellent universities. We also have, I would say, the kind of a democratic system, so that our willingness to express ideas and to also experiment with those is quite positive, and we need to encourage more and more of this to happen. When I look, I think there is a lot of people here working in policies, in governments, and also local initiatives. And then, of course, I'm not sure if anybody here is representing the entrepreneurial sector. If somebody is, please raise your hand. But so far, I haven't met many or anybody in this group. If you want to deploy solutions at scale, because we talked about it yesterday, we have a lot of solutions, so it's about going at scale. Also, I believe we still lack some solutions, because the new solutions bring more challenges and need other solutions that come with it. But we need policies that are really looking at the longer term aspect. Why am I saying this is, when I have the choice, and I work with several startups from all over the world, and they need to choose Europe, sometimes, one of the biggest arguments is saying, Europe, you have the regulations in place that promote our products to come into your market. Also, we have this, one single market. The EU had the vision, right, when it was, let's say, deployed, and it's still growing, to have this one single market. But we need to make sure that these policies, these incentives are there in the long term to allow business to make choices to come here deliberately, and not just because there is a policy that maybe in 10 years is gonna disappear. So having those long-term signals and that stability for the market. Also, when I think of what we can do in advance to this, is to promote access. So I think that this conference is an excellent example of giving access to people to resources, the same way we need to encourage people to take a leap forward and to be innovators. When I think of my generation, I'm between the millennials and the Gen Z, but the millennials are called kind of the side hustle generation. And what does it mean? It means that many of us have a job, but also at the side, we like to do something else. And so I think that the governments, they have a responsibility also to understand that this is happening and to encourage more people to make those side hustles become something. And when I look at the different ecosystems that are present in Europe, of course, Germany is quite a strong one when we think of innovation and entrepreneurship, Berlin being kind of, the top 3 cities, I would say, in Europe where startups happen. You have London, of course, you have Paris, and you need to allow access of these resources to a wider population. When we think of, let's say, cleverness or technology, it can exist everywhere, but it's the ecosystem that is not present everywhere. And so, yes, we need more networks, more accelerators, more incubators to make these ideas take shape. And so, again, we think about ideas, about innovations, but what we need here is disruptive innovations. Because, let's face it, we are having these lights, not because we continuously improved on developing candles, right? So you need some disruptive innovation to occur sometimes. And the main difference, I would say, between researchers, which, I'm at the heart a researcher, and entrepreneurs, is that they can capitalize on that research. So, first of all, I think that the basics is, to do the so-called literature review, so understanding the past. By understanding the past, you can understand the problem better, and also asking yourself the right question, because it's easy to get answers, but the quality of the answer is as good as the question that is being asked. And so you need to do that previous research, then you basically find the gaps, right? And then you innovate. And then the entrepreneurs, what it does is that it capitalizes on it, it finds how to make value out of this, and basically that's where beautiful solutions come out. And also I believe that companies, can be also building different societies. And I'd like to share with you some examples, not the pictures that I want to show you later, so don't worry, not yet. But it's just some names, I was thinking today of what startups that I work with could be also interesting for you. And I will just bring to your attention 3 of them. One of them is Swiss, it's called Voltiris, and what they do, just to show you how clever these people are, they're basically building solar panels, but if we think of regulations, normally there are barriers, right? So we need to eliminate these barriers as much as we can. And what they do is that they implement them in greenhouses, so basically for agricultures, and because it's indoors and not outdoors, they basically skip the regulation. On top of that, even more clever, they divert part of the sunlight for the crop, so that the crop is basically producing more, and the other part of the wavelength, so of the sun that you don't need, it's diverted in the converter. So that way, they basically make farmers become energy independent, just to give you an idea. Other one, which is a bit more crazy, Genomines, they're from France, and this one is about mining. People don't talk about mining very often, but again, if we think about the future of energy, we have the so-called critical raw materials. Nickel is one of them. What do you do? Of course, you could do more mining, but that we all know is probably not the right answer. So they've come up with this, again, solution. They kind of did a bit of a bioengineering trick, I would say. And what they do is that they take plants, they basically optimize the plants to get nickel out of the soil. And then, of course, the soil that they use is a soil that has some nickel. It doesn't have enough so that a traditional mining plant would be economically feasible. And then they harvest those plants and they get nickel out. And I think, in the future, you will see more and more of these examples taking place. The last one, I'm mentioning them because they're German, Magnotherm from Dresden. No, not Darmstadt. I want to apologize, Darmstadt, actually. And what they do is a solution that is close to all of us. It's refrigeration. So all of you have, I guess, a fridge in your house, and that fridge uses probably a fluid, and that fluid is not very environmentally friendly. Again, they spinned out from the university with a so-called magnetocaloric material. I'm not going to go into details, don't worry. But it's very simple. You apply a magnetic field, and basically the magnet cools and heats, and if you put a liquid that is, in that case, let's say if the magnet is cool, you put a liquid that is hot, it's going to cool the liquid. And again, they're quite well known in the startup scene, I would say. They're small, but they're big. They're getting bigger. And you will probably see them very, very fast accelerating. And one of the keys of all these companies that I mentioned, maybe compared to I would say the average, is that the process of iteration is very fast. Myself, I work for something called here creative destruction, and so it means that you create and you destruct. It's a very fast process, and we need to make sure that there is policies also to basically encourage this approach to be as fast as possible, and to not be discouraged by the fear, right, of failing, because you might have the so-called MVP, minimum viable product, that is useless after you test it, but that's okay. So being okay with that. And the second thing also is to take risks. So to be entrepreneurs, it's a huge risk, and that's why I think that many of the people in the startup world are young as well, because they have less, let's say, strings attached. But also, it's an extremely rewarding journey. When I think of the people that I work with, they're surrounded by mentors, by experts, by investors that are all trying, to make their solutions succeed. And simply that journey of personal growth and professional growth is more than enough for somebody to jump on this career. So maybe to kind of then go to the last word. What I think that these companies are doing is, as I said before, to create value, right? To go over critiquing and actually creating value by understanding the necessity of their clients, of their communities, and also of the shareholders. And in a similar analogy is the one of harmony, I would say. The same way different notes might sound good together, here, they have different stakeholders that together, if they're united by a sense of purpose, it's easier to make them sound better. So yeah, maybe just the lights. Yeah, if you could put up this light slide. It's just to share with you, I don't know how well you can see with the sun, but just, a bit what happens when you have a common sense of belonging and of purpose. I've been part, and I'm still part of different associations, bottom-up and top-down initiatives as well. I'll just try to go from, let's say, I'll start from the bottom left, just to give you an idea. So that's the European Energy Ambassadors. So it's top-up initiatives from the European Commission, where basically they take energy enthusiasts from all over Europe to be ambassadors of this change, right? Of this change happening, and they give us quite a lot of access to the experts in their network, but also a chance for us to meet other people that are trying to make a difference. If I go then, I would take the top part is also combining this high-level approach with hard and practice skills. So, I can see it there. Okay, perfect. Sorry, I didn't realize. So basically, that's the Solar Electric Lab, just telling you, to combine that top-down and bottom-up approach when it comes to skills. And you might see, in the middle of the picture is something that looks like a tunnel. That tunnel is actually the Grande Dixence. It's in Switzerland. It's the largest dam of the world. They were mentioning us that if you took all the cement of that dam, it would go around the equator with a 30 centimeters cement. I'm not sure about the width, but basically structure. And if you put in together people that come from different disciplines, different backgrounds, different countries, and you show all of what is possible and all these innovations that are happening, for sure you don't leave these places without any ideas and without any empowerment. And so, yeah, this is just for you to show some pictures, of the different things we do, as I said, really involving us. There is a picture of me on the bottom right. I was trying to make coffee using a solar oven or something cool like that. It took a while, but it worked. And at the end, it's also the level of customization. So maybe the pictures that you see, so in the middle on the left, it's just you will see some papers. It's actually a WWF food workshop. It's very customized, so we asked them to customize this workshop for us on how empowering us to basically change diets. And at the top is actually an example of my day-to-day work activities, where we take founders, we place them in a room with investors, with companies, and with other entrepreneurs that have done this before, and we provide, a customized experience. So what it means is, if we go before to the workshop, for instance, to give an analogy, you were in a workshop and you were giving trainings on different things, but those trainings were maybe not particularly oriented to your own difficulties. And so what we do here is that we take a founder and we really make him prioritize on the 3 objectives that he should be working on for the next couple of months, and all the room tries and gives advice on those particular challenges. So yeah, just to leave you with an idea that there is tons of people, really hundreds, tons, that are trying to make a difference. That's what keeps me positive. Yeah, if there is one advice that I would like to give you all, is to go where the energy is. That's never, let's say, gonna bring you to the wrong path. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Livia. So everybody, you know the procedure with the TEDme app by now. So I think we should have, there it is, the QR code, because we're going to be asking you all kinds of very interesting questions. And Livia hopefully will have something to say about the answers, because even as you said yourself, it's important to have an interesting and good question to determine the quality of the answer, right? So we're going to see how well we did. Okay, so the first question is, if the climate crisis did not exist, what would all of you be working on? I think it's super interesting, so imagine that.
I apologize, I came up with that question.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, actually, because I would imagine most people who are here, Livia, are so dedicated to this topic and have been for a long time. So maybe some people couldn't even imagine doing anything else with their lives, but I think it's a really valuable exercise. So how can we see the results? I'm just wondering. Okay, these are just individual results. Okay. All right.
Freezing at home is for sure an interesting. Maybe getting melting.
Social injustice, okay, but that would be in business. So some people looking just to make money. Teaching, biodiversity, animal welfare, graphic design, again, education, bicycles, loosely connected to green mobility, maybe, nature conservation anyway. Again, academia, teaching, another existential threat, because we have so many. Writing, so environmental issues, peace and security. Livia, there does seem to be some common themes emerging.
Exactly. So, yeah, I see for sure that, let's say, the bigger environmental field, and so ecology and biodiversity is coming up quite often, as well as education, I would say, and social justice in general, right? I think that's peace building, absolutely. Like these 3 main themes I can see.
I like the improvised theater. It's also very good. Improvisational theater. So we also have people who need to wear many hats. Really interesting. Are we ready for the next question? Or do people want another moment? Okay, yeah, we've skipped over to the next question. And that is, how familiar are you with the startup scene in the field of climate protection? So just that's the different kind of format of this question. So either you're very familiar or not familiar at all. We have a little. So I guess, okay, so very familiar is 5, and 1 is not very familiar, and the ones in the middle are sort of in the middle. So, okay, so does that surprise you, Livia? That
Absolutely. Again, it's an example of the popping bubbles, right? I'm happy to be here today because hopefully you will understand a bit more. But it's also surprising because when I look at the numbers of investments in Europe, kind of climate is the top. So it goes, kind of above and beyond all the others. So just for you to know, there is a lot of investments happening in climate startups, I mean. But that's, kind of surprising. But I think it's an example of these bubbles that I was mentioning before. Like, what is my incentive to be here today, right? Like, I'm even having conversations. I'm not part of any project. And, it takes energy to get out of your bubble. So probably an encouragement to, startup events are fun as well. So join them. And, just pop that bubble.
But why do you think, or it would seem that there's not enough cooperation between the business sector and civil society? So is it so hard to imagine that you can make money by doing good? Like, is that something that people still can't wrap their minds around? Like, you either have to choose in your life if you want to make money or if you want to save the planet, and somehow those two can never go together, but maybe they can.
Yeah, I mean, this is not an easy answer with a yes or no. There are for sure, people that have startups in the climate, let's say, field, not because of their values and their ideals, but because of the money that is pouring into that pot. So I feel you. Not everybody's like that, but at the same time, in where I work is called Station F. It's the largest incubator of the world, at least the French claim it to be. And there is not just climate, there is AI, there is space, there is luxury, blah, blah, blah. But the climate one is the most community-oriented, I would say. So there are for sure a lot of people that are interested in climate actually work for climate. I think it's probably, and I wouldn't even say it's geography because here we are in Berlin, but maybe the fact that the participants, right, a lot of you are from different countries, maybe not these big startup hubs, just, again, shows that we need more of these networks, more of these accelerators and incubators to take part of these programs. And if I can also suggest you something, if, imagine if I were a startup and I had to start in Paris, the costs are huge. In comparison, if you were doing it, I don't know, I met a lot of people from Bulgaria, Romania in the last 24 hours. The costs for you are a lot less, lower. So you have a lot of cards to play that are in your let's say, in your hands, and probably it's just that network, that support, that access that is lacking. So I think it's more lack of access to resources and communities that do that.
But what do you think is a way for there to be more cooperation between civil society and the business sector? Like, how do we help people who care about climate really move into entrepreneurship? Yeah,
so again, there's different ways you can do it. One way is for sure, kind of education. I think there is quite a few. I don't know, I met somebody earlier that, was working on educational projects. So, maybe you work for a company, you do this 5 days training, you come back to your company and you go there with a different mindset, right? So that could be for sure one way. Especially thinking that we need to work for the rest of our life. I don't know if I'll ever get to a pension or if I'll ever have a pension. So probably maybe eventually I'll be bored of this. I don't know. That's why I asked the first question, right? And so encouraging these parallel career moves is one of them. The second one could probably be just because the barrier to entry, as I was saying before, is harder, and the events also, they're costly. I think that people here could not attend unless they were part of the EUKI network, and so having more of these open events, but also sometimes more informal, because I can imagine that for somebody that is maybe not extroverted, being in such a big conference, not knowing anybody is a lot of energy. So having more and smaller informal gatherings, but again, it's very city dependent, I would say, and you really need to push out. So maybe encouraging that from local activities and groups and so on and so forth as well.
Mm-hmm. We have one more for our audience.
Oof.
So, yeah, about your outlook, your optimism. How positive and confident are you that we can overcome the challenges posed by the climate and energy transition?
Okay.
So, number 1 being not very confident, number 5 being very confident, and then somewhere in between. Do you know what this tells me?
They're trying not to answer, I don't know.
No, it's cautious, pragmatic optimism. Mm-hmm. Right? We cannot afford to be pessimistic, but it's not easy to be euphorically optimistic. We cannot be overconfident and over-enthusiastically optimistic, but we cannot give up. So that's what I read from that.
I think this is a very European mentality also. I think if you went to the US, it would be quite different, or, it's also the way I see the difference between how you sell your ideas, right? In Europe, we're also more on the precautionary aspect. That's why they call us the land of regulations. But yeah, there's 4 people that are very confident, so
Yeah.
I'm part of that. I cannot vote, I don't have a phone on hand. Or at least between 4 and 5, I would say.
I think it is maybe a cultural influence, but we also see, there's 2 aspects to this, like all of the self-help research tells us that if you think positively, then you can actually impact your reality, and when you visualize success, then you're far more likely to achieve success. So there's definitely something to be said about that, and maybe the Europeans can learn to kind of will themselves into more confidence or optimism, and the Americans maybe can become a little bit more realistic. So there's two sides of it, but there's also an advantage to being sometimes a little bit more cautious. But of course, if you want somebody to really be innovative or to really be disruptive in a good way, then you have to let go of your sort of kind of self-doubt and the sort of uncertainty that you put in yourself, and you need a little bit of crazy visionary confidence, maybe. But hopefully that's what the younger generation can bring to people.
I mean, being very honest, I think that sometimes being a bit naive helps. That's, you don't see all the obstacles, and that makes you, let's say, go into the let's say, the dark zone with less fear. Just because you don't know, right? So sometimes ignorance is a bliss, let's put it like that, and maybe you're less ignorant here, and so you're a bit more cautious. But at the same time, you're right, it's an attitude. They say Silicon Valley is an attitude that can do everything is possible, and I think sometimes we just need a bit more of that as well.
Or there's someone who famously said, pessimism is a luxury we cannot allow ourselves.
Absolutely.
So that was Golda Meir, I think. Anyway, let's take the last 10 minutes to give our audience a chance to speak directly to Livia and ask some questions, or even if you just want to make a comment about anything that you've heard in her presentation or our conversation. I'm curious also to hear from our participants. Oh, I like the old-fashioned way, yes. So with the microphone, the gentleman on this side of the... well, I saw his arm shoot up first, but if that's okay, since she's holding the mic, let's start with the lady. Okay, go ahead.
I'm very fast.
Okay.
I only wanted to make one comment. During the last founding period of EUKI, our team had a project about green startups. It was called Green Tech Lab, and we really achieved that more than 50, I think 52 green startups in rural regions founded, and some of them are really successful. And I think also our website is still active. If you want to have a look, I think...
Absolutely. I'm in the recruitment phase of startups, so if anybody has cool ones, please send them over.
Okay, so now the very patient gentleman on this side of the room.
No, thanks very much for the presentation. It was great. I just was wondering, I mean, you were talking about bubble, and I think you used the singular, and I'm not sure I would take that. I think we are all in many different bubbles because we are human, and I think it's helpful to think of that something is not the bubble. There's not the entrepreneurial bubble, there's not the climate bubble. There are many different bubbles, and in a way, I think bubbles interact and they become foam, and that's a good thing. So I think, you know, it's important that we are just a bit, you know, aware of that language and, yeah, take it. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, you are a chemist, and, you know, I also have many different bubbles, so I think that's helpful. The other thing is, I mean, you were saying that Europe lacks long-term policies. I'm not sure I would agree. I mean, if I look at the emission trading, I mean, we have a very long-term policy. If I look at our targets, we have targets that take us to the second half of the century. And the last, that's more like a question is, I mean, you said, I mean, we should go where the energy is. What do you mean?
Absolutely. So for the first one, bubbles, absolutely. I mean, it's the sake of simplicity. I agree with you. It's the same when you do the personality test, you know, they put you in categories, is for the sake of simplification. But absolutely, I think it's also a valid point. So the second question, you mean what I mean by, let's say, long-term visions and policies, right? I think that one example is the energy prices. You know, again, there is certain companies that need to do the projections, like the startups themselves, to ask for more money. They need to do the project financing and kind of calculate how much money they will need in the future. And many of these companies, you know, are renewable companies, and they need to estimate how much they will profit, because they don't know what are going to be the tariffs, what are going to be the incentives, especially as they maybe expand in different countries also within Europe. It's hard for them to make these estimations, and they struggle with that. So maybe that's more specific. It could also be, I'm the first one that I'm not afraid of saying, I don't know, it could be that we, as a community in the workplace I am, that probably we lack maybe the information. So if you have this long-term information available, please, you know, of course, reach out. Would be very helpful for us. The last one on go where the energy is you know, sometimes you maybe feel stuck, right? Or there's even projects that you know, that you have to do at work that maybe are not bringing you a lot of energy. I think that life is too brief to lose. You know, you basically need to fight your challenge, your battles, and finding those battles where you get more energy out of. So if you find, for instance, you know, that there is a certain local group or a certain project or a certain group of people that you like working with, of course, don't exclude yourself to just that, but, you know, put a lot of more energies into that. And that's what I mean. Try and understand, feel where you find these positive vibes and go into it. And that could be different for everybody. Yeah? Not saying everybody has the same energy. Don't know if that answered the question. Perfect. Thank you.
We have a comment via the TEDme app, so not a question, and somebody just writes, I really appreciate your work and absolutely enjoyed your talk. So thank you. That's very nice. So thank you. Any other question from our audience, either spontaneous or you can send it via the TEDme. One thing that I wanted to ask you, Livia, because the way that I understood what you meant by these different bubbles is just there are, in fact, let's say, certain groups of people that are just by virtue of their circumstances or their economic situation or their geography or their family situation maybe don't have access to knowledge or opportunities or engagement. And if we're looking at people feeling engaged and have ownership for the climate transition, who do you think are these groups of people who really do need to be supported to integrate better into this green transition across Europe? Like, who would they be then?
Again, very, very hard question. I'll try and answer in two ways. I have 2 minutes. Okay, I'll try and be brief. On one side is on the entrepreneurial world, the way I see it is that it's composed of the poor, so they have no other, let's say, solution. So they're like, I don't care about risking, I have nothing to lose. And then there's the rich that say, even if I lose, I'm safe. So in one sense, then on this, let's say, in the entrepreneurship world, you lack the middle ground, right? Because they're the ones that are a bit in the weird position of saying, I have a little bit risk, not too much, what should I do? And they get stuck, and that leads to inaction. In general, when I think of climate, this might be controversial, but I think we need to talk more to the rich, because they're the ones emitting the most. So I don't know if maybe we can go in the schools of all these rich people and educate their children, and then go home and mommy, daddy, change the way you work. Maybe that could be I'm not saying the best, but maybe the fast way out of this as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, there's been so much talk about rural communities not, keeping up with the cities, but we don't have to forget that it's actually the people in urban centers, and as you say, the ones who are at higher levels of economic success who are actually the biggest emitters. So definitely very important to keep all these dimensions in mind. So, Livia, if there are no other questions, any last thoughts from anybody? I think you have really provoked a lot of people here in a good way and given people really a lot of food for thought, and we have to be courageous. And hopefully it's the young people with the tools, with the opportunities for education, can go out and become these entrepreneurs and take a risk and innovate, and that the people working in civil society, also in policy, will support them so we can actually work towards smart solutions to fix our planet. So thank you so much, Livia.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.